She was dragged out of first class, like a criminal, no questions. No explanation, just because she was a black woman in a navy blue suit. But when her had hit the floor, and the words United Nations diplomatic ambassador stared back at everyone on that plane froze. What happened next flipped the entire airline industry upside down. This is not just about a seat. It is about power, prejudice, and the moment silence became justice. Get her out of here. The voice sliced through the first-class cabin like a blade, sharp, entitled, and echoing with disdain. Every head turned, every neck craned, and I standing there in my navy blue suit, with my modest carry-on bag in one hand and a boarding pass trembling in the other suddenly, became the spectacle no one paid for but all stared at. I did not belong. The man who shouted was a white security officer, tall, wide-chested, his badge catching the sunlight pouring through the cabin window, his finger jabbed toward me like a weapon. "Madam, you are going to have to step out of this area. First class is not open for reseating at this time." I blinked, confused, trying to speak, but the words stuck to my tongue like tar. My mouth moved, but nothing came out. Behind him stood a woman, stiff, severe, and smug in a pressed blazer with a metal nameplate. Victoria Langston, head of cabin security operations. She had a thin, cruel mouth and eyes that scanned like a barcode reader, cold, soulless, programmed. Her clipboard was clutched tightly like a scepter of judgment. I was not a person to her. I was a miscalculation in her perfect little hierarchy. "She does not belong here," Victoria hissed to the flight attendant, her voice low but venomous. "There has been a mistake. I need her removed immediately." I looked around. No one spoke for me. No one looked me in the eye. They looked through me, as if I were something in the way, something inconvenient. And that is when the memories surged back. The stairs, the quiet clutching of purses, the unspoken assumptions. I thought we had come further than this, but here I was, standing in 2025, feeling like I would been shoved into 1955. I am in seat 3A, I finally said, my voice barely audible. The male officer stepped closer, puffing his chest. "Madam, I need you to come with me." He did not ask to see my boarding pass. He did not ask for identification. He just wanted me gone. I stood frozen, not from fear, but from humiliation. The kind that burns in your stomach and shoots through your limbs, making them heavy, making your skin crawl. A mother with her teenage daughter whispered something and gave me a look, half pity, half disgust. The daughter looked confused. The mother tugged her arm away, as if I were contagious. My hand tightened around my bag, knuckles turning pale. "Now, madam," the officer ordered, louder this time. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I could feel it rising inside me, that quiet storm I had spent decades learning to suppress. But I did not want a scene. Not yet. I stepped to the side. Trembling, my bag tilted and fell open on the floor. Something slid across the aisle and stopped beneath the flight attendant's polished black shoe. A small, navy blue card holder. "My Ed." She bent to pick it up. "What is this?" She mumbled, flipping it open. There was a beat of silence. Then another. And then everything stopped. Her eyes widened. Her voice cracked as she read aloud. barely believing the words in her mouth. United Nations Permanent Representative. Alicia Monroe. Diplomatic status. A collective gasp spread like wildfire through the cabin. Victoria Langston's face drained of color. The security officer froze, his hand still half raised toward me. A murmur rose from the passengers. I slowly stepped forward. My voice was calm, now measured. Clear, steel wrapped in velvet. Do you always treat your international diplomats like criminals? Or is it just the ones who look like me? No one answered. Not a soul. Victoria fumbled with her clipboard, the paper trembling in her grasp. I did not know. Didn't ask either. I said. Just assumed. The silence was deafening now. Not a single person moved. Even the baby in row 4 stopped crying. The flight attendant, red-faced and shaking, handed me back my id with both hands. Ambassador Monroe, I am so sorry. Please, take your seat. I did, slowly, gracefully, as if I belonged there, which I did and always had. As I sat down in 3, I heard the quiet flick of a phone camera clicking. Then another. Someone was filming. Someone had seen. Victoria's eyes met mine for a brief second, and what I saw there was not just fear. It was the collapse of a whole illusion, that her power protected her from consequences. That chapter of silence had ended. And this was just the beginning. I am Alicia Monroe, age 38, American-born daughter of a schoolteacher and a postal worker. Black woman. Harvard, educated, fluent in French, Spanish, and Swahili. And I have sat in war rooms where peace between nations hung by a thread. I have walked the marble corridors of Geneva and New York, where silence in diplomacy can scream louder than rage. And yet, a simple domestic flight seat 3, Chicago to DS, was all it took for the world to try and reduce me to nothing but the color of my skin. I did not grow up rich. My parents, Raymond and Dolores Monroe, raised me in a small brick house in South Side Chicago. My mother taught 3rd grade for 27 years. My father delivered mail 6 days a week, rain or shine. They did not raise me to chase wealth. They raised me to walk with integrity, to speak with purpose, to listen with care. My mother used to say, "You do not need to shout to change the world. You just need to know exactly what you are saying." I did not always want to be a diplomat. As a kid, I thought I would be a poet, but life has its ways of choosing for you. One night in high school, I watched a documentary on the Rwandan genocide. I saw the silent halls of the where no one spoke fast enough, where delay meant death. Something shattered in me, or maybe something formed. I remember sitting up all night, researching every resolution, every failure, every attempt at healing the world. I knew then I did not want to write about the world's pain. I wanted to change the systems that caused it. I worked my way through Harvard on scholarships, grants, and grit. Never once did I ask for a shortcut. I earned every late night in the library, every debate win, every position paper. I interned in Dancy, walked to work in heels that blistered my feet, drank coffee for dinner. I made it into the UN's Young Diplomats program at 25. Then, slowly, painstakingly, I rose through the ranks. Peacekeeping. Missions. climate agreements, counter-terrorism task forces. My badge may be small, but it was forged in rooms most people do not even know exist. And yet, none of that mattered the moment I walked into that plane. To them, I was just another black woman in a nice suit, clearly in the wrong place. No context, no curiosity, just judgment wrapped in procedure. And that was not the first time, not even close. I have been asked if I was the assistant when I was the keynote speaker. I have had people thank the man next to me for the work I presented. I have seen security check everyone aside, but mine, just to make sure. These are not incidents. They are patterns. Microaggressions stacked into a wall that people like me are expected to climb again and again, without ever making a sound. But I have always made sound. Quietly. Strategically. And today, on that plane, I did not plan to say a word, not because I did not have the words, but because I wanted to see who else would speak, who would break the silence. Apparently, no one, until I had hit the floor. And suddenly, I was not invisible, I was terrifying, because now I was someone important. Now, they could not afford to be wrong, but I was the same woman 10 seconds before they read that card. Same dignity, same intelligence, same value. It is funny how the world measures worth by titles, as if ambassador makes me more human than mother or teacher or janitor. I sat in that seat not because I wanted revenge. I sat because I needed to reclaim the space they tried to steal from me. I looked out the window of seat 3 as the plane taxied down the runway. The sun was setting in shades of gold and coral, casting long shadows across the tarmac. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, tired but proud. I straightened my blazer, tucked the id back into my wallet, and exhaled, not in anger, in resolve. Victoria Langston still had not apologized. She sat in the galley, clutching that clipboard like it could save her now. The flight attendant avoided my gaze every time she walked by. The man who filmed it, he gave me a nod once, an apology. Maybe. Or respect. Hard to tell. But I was not angry at them. Not in the way people expected. I was exhausted. Exhausted by the fact that I had to carry the weight of proof just to exist peacefully in a seat I paid for. Exhausted that my worth only became visible through a laminated piece of plastic. Exhausted that the woman who screamed at me would sleep tonight without ever wondering how deeply she cut me. And still, despite all that, I did not cry. Not anymore, because I have cried enough in bathrooms, in hotel rooms, in back seats of Ubers after meetings where I was erased. I have cried enough for people who will never understand what it is like to be dotted by default. I have cried enough, and now I write. I remember. I speak, because someone needs to, and not just for me, but for every young black girl watching, wondering if she can sit in 3 without being told she is in the wrong seat. The answer is yes, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. Her name was Victoria Langston, age 52. White. Midwestern accent. Hair always set in that aggressively perfect blonde, helmet rigid. Unmoving, like her worldview. She wore a gray pantsuit with thin blue pinstripes, tailored too tight, as if control had a uniform. Her posture. Military straight. Her mouth. Tight like a purse that never opened for kindness, and in her hand, always that clipboard. A symbol, maybe, of rules, of protocol, of power she clutched like it defined her, because it did. Victoria was not just another employee of Skybridge Airlines. No, she was the head of cabin security operations, a self-appointed gatekeeper of the skies. And she walked the cabin like she owned the clouds. She did not hate black people. At least, not in the way she would admit. She had black coworkers, a favorite black singer. She even once posted a #boom square on her Facebook page in 2020, right next to a photo of her labradoodle. But what she hated, what unsettled her, was disruption to her order. And nothing disrupts her sense of control like seeing a black woman sitting in a seat she did not expect her to sit in. Victoria Langston had built a fortress around her world, a place where people came in two categories: those who follow her lead, and those who need to be corrected. And the moment I stepped into first class in my navy blue suit with my locks pinned high, my eyes calm, and my silence sharp, I disrupted her code. I did not flinch when she looked at me. I did not shrink. And that was unacceptable. "Excuse me, miss, can I see your boarding pass again?" she would said, the first time, her tone fox polite, eyes already scanning for inconsistencies. I handed it over with a nod. Her lips tightened. "Seat 3, she repeated flatly, like it was an error. She scanned it again, searching for a technicality to eject me on. "Is this your bag?" she asked next, tapping my carry-on with her shoe like it was a foreign object. "Yes," I answered. Her smile faded. She hated that I was not nervous. And then came the pivot from passive inquiry to full authority, a calculated escalation. "You will need to step out of this section. We may need to reassign you based on verification protocols." Verification protocols. Interesting phrase. It meant, "You do not look like you belong here, so I am going to keep fishing until I find a reason to move you." I remember the moment the male security officer arrived. Victoria stood behind him like a puppeteer with a badge-shaped marionette. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. The system was designed to carry her intentions without effort. And so, he yelled, and I was dragged through that silent gauntlet of eyes. Victoria never flinched. She did not blink when I looked back. She did not offer a glance of doubt or reconsideration. Because in her world, she was right. She always had been. And here's the thing about people like Victoria Langston. They are never truly surprised when the world tells them they were wrong, because they do not believe it. Not really. They believe the world has become too sensitive, that they are the victims of political correctness, not perpetrators of harm. So when my United Nations had slid across that cabin floor, and the world stopped breathing, she did not apologize. She pivoted. She went quiet. She waited. The moment was too fast for her to mount a defense, but I saw her calculating. The clipboard, her armor. She held it closer now, like it could shield her from consequences. She whispered urgently to the flight attendant, I did not see her credentials. The attendant did not respond, because truth does not need commentary. I remember her standing at the front of the cabin after takeoff, back turned to me, but every fiber of her body coiled with tension, like a mask slipping in public, and she did not know whether to run or fix it. Victoria had been in this job too long to lose it over a misunderstanding. But it was not a misunderstanding. It was a misjudgment. It was profiling. It was disrespect wrapped in protocol and delivered with a smile. And I was not going to let it slide. I did not say anything more that flight. I did not need to, because the truth was now airborne 30,000 feet and rising. Recorded. Witnessed. And Victoria knew. She knew that the people in that cabin, even if they did not speak, would go home and tell someone what they saw. She knew that every second she stood in silence was a second the video gained momentum in the world outside her control. Power, real power, does not come from a clipboard or a title. It comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to shrink when others try to erase you. I watched her the rest of that flight. How she avoided eye contact. How her hands trembled when she poured her coffee. How she clutched that clipboard not like a weapon anymore, but like a lifeline. Because for the first time in her career, she was no longer in control, and she knew it. It was not the yelling that hurt the most. It was not even the moment I was told to leave, or when the security guard's thick fingers pointed toward the economy section like I was some intruder who slipped through a crack. It was the eyes, the hundreds of them, watching, judging. Not one stood up, not one voice said, "Wait, maybe she belongs here." Not one hand reached out. I could feel their gaze like heat across my skin, some wide with discomfort, others narrowed with smug validation. That kind of look that silently screams, "I knew it. She does not belong here." There was a man in a blazer 2 rows up. He tilted his glasses, pretending to read the Wall Street Journal, but watching everything behind the corner of his eye. There was a woman cradling her Prada, purse tighter, on her lap like I might snatch it, as if my tailored navy blue suit was a costume. Not credentials. And the worst, an older white man near the bulkhead, who chuckled low, not to be heard, but enough for me to feel the vibration of his amusement. I bent to pick up my ed and passport. The bag that had tipped in the aisle, my hands fumbling. Heart pounding. Lips sealed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "I am Alicia Monroe. I negotiated ceasefires while you were sipping lats. I have stood beside world leaders you only see in history books." But I did not say it, because I knew if I raised my voice, I would become the stereotype they expected. The angry black woman. The threat. The disruption. So I swallowed it. Again, I walked the slowest walk of my life. The walk of someone who knows every step forward is another mile of humiliation. Not because of what I did, but because of what they saw. I reached row 10. Economy, seat 10B, and I sat. Tight quarters. Humming vents, elbows brushing strangers. The plane smelled of synthetic lemon and recycled tension. And in my head, silence. Deafening. Thick silence that felt louder than the chaos before. I sat still for 10 minutes. Maybe 15, My fingers pressed the unid so tightly it bent. I tried to breathe, to remember all the mantras they teach us in conflict resolution. Remain calm. De-escalate. Observe before you respond. But what they do not teach, what no manual can prepare you for, is the humiliation that comes when your humanity is questioned in public. A flight attendant came to me. Eyes lowered. Voice hushed as, "Munru," she said. We are very sorry. Your seat was, in fact, confirmed. Would you like to return to 3A? It was too late for apologies. Too late for correction. What was taken from me could not be given back with words, whispered in guilt. I rose anyway. Walked back, slow. This time, no one looked. Not directly, but I saw them. I saw the way their eyes dropped to their laps. I saw the regret quiet and shameful not for what they did, but for what they witnessed and ignored. I passed Victoria Langston. She did not speak, her jaw clenched tight, face stiff. I did not stop. Seat 3 was still warm, the armrests untouched, a water bottle still capped. I sat down, placed my bag beside me, and stared straight ahead. The flight took off. Engines roaring, wings cutting clouds. Inside, the tension hung like fog. I took out my journal, not my phone, not my laptop. My journal. I wrote. Today I remembered the cost of being first, the cost of being only, and the cost of being seen before being known. There was a girl behind me. 16. Maybe. She leaned forward just before landing. She whispered, "I saw what happened. I am sorry." I turned. Surprised. She was white. Freckles, pale green eyes. Her voice wavered. "My mom said you were probably in the wrong seat, but I did not think so." I nodded. "Thank you for saying something. It was not fair." She whispered again. "I want to be someone who says something next time." And that moment, that was the first breath of healing. Not from Victoria, not from the airline, but from a stranger who really saw me and dared to name the injustice. We landed. People rose fast. Avoiding eye contact, I stayed seated. Waited. Watched as they filed past, clunky luggage in tow, masks of shame and silence. Victoria was the last to step off. She turned for a moment. Clipboard now cradled like an empty shell. Still, she did not speak. Still, I did not flinch. Because in every stare of that cabin, I had felt the shame they tried to place on me. But now, it was not mine to carry. It never was. The plane door opened with a familiar hiss, that metallic gasp of pressurized air escaping into routine, into airport noise and bland greetings. But this time, no one rushed out, because now they all knew. Now, the name Alyssa Monroe was not just an awkward presence in first class. Now, the words United Nations diplomatic representative were hanging above them like a thundercloud, heavy and waiting to strike. Now, they were all wondering, what have we done? The video had already begun its life. Somewhere in row 6, a young man in a black hoodie, silent the whole flight, had uploaded it to his socials as soon as the seatbelt light dinged off. The caption read, "Black woman gets kicked from first class for being black. Until her unit falls out. Watch the crew panic." And people did watch. By the time I stepped off the jet bridge into the terminal, my phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then kept buzzing. Texts, emails, mentions, voicemails from names I had not heard in months, colleagues, reporters, even old classmates. One text from Geneva simply read, "Tell me it is not you." Another from my assistant, "Ken wants a comment." I said, "You are not ready." I was not, but the world did not care. The terminal walkway stretched in front of me like a stage I did not ask for. People began staring before I even reached baggage claim. Whispers trailed behind me, and Victoria Langston, she did not trail behind. She disappeared, vanished the second we landed, as if she could outrun the consequences, now catching up with her. By the time I stepped into the black car, waiting curbside, a Ken headline flashed across the airport TV. Undiplomat mistakenly removed from first-class airline under fire. The reporter's voice sounded distant, surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. But it was mine, all of it. The car door closed. Silence again. Only the hum of wheels and the weight of every moment that led to this. My phone lit up again. An email. Subject line, "Immediate response requested on Secretary General's office." I stared at it. Then another buzz. Unknown number. I answered. "Alicia, this is Robert Holloway, Internal Relations at Skybridge Airlines." His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "I just want to personally apologize for the, very regrettable misunderstanding today." I said nothing. He continued, "We are already placing Victoria Langston on immediate suspension. The staff involved will undergo bias training. We would like to offer you a formal in-person apology. And of course, compensation." Compensation. There it was. The bandage. As if money could erase the way that girl on the flight looked at me with fear. As if a travel voucher could mend the humiliation of being reduced to a threat before I even spoke a word. "Ma. Holloway," I said. Voice steady. "You do not have to apologize for one person's mistake." He exhaled. Relieved. "I appreciate your understanding." As Munru. "I am not finished," I said. Silence. "You have to apologize for the system that empowered her. The silent rules. The unchecked assumptions. The way none of your staff questioned her orders even when it meant dragging a black woman out of her seat without cause." He cleared his throat. We are certainly looking into the larger implications." "You are not looking," I cut in. "You are reacting." Another pause. "I will issue a statement," I said. "When I am ready." I ended the call. That evening, in my apartment overlooking the Capitol Dome, I sat by the window. Rain tapped the glass in soft rhythms, like the kind my mother used to call truth rain, the kind that comes when the sky can't hold back anymore. I stared at the ID card still on the table, a piece of plastic. Name, number, title. And yet, it had more power to defend me in that moment than my humanity did. I remembered Victoria's face when she saw it. how her lips parted slightly, how her eyes flicked, not just in confusion, but in fear, because she knew she messed up, and more importantly, she messed up publicly, not just in front of passengers, but in front of the world. Somewhere in the quiet of that memory, I realized something. This was bigger than me. This was not just about what happened on that plane. This was about every teenager who is followed around in a store. Every father forced to prove he belongs in his own neighborhood. Every black woman asked to justify her place in a boardroom or on a flight, or in a country that still whispers you are lucky to be here. That night, I opened my laptop. I began to write, not just an email, not just a statement, but a testimony. A call, not for revenge, but for reckoning. I clicked post and shared the truth. From my perspective, in my voice. My name is Alicia Monroe. I am a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And today, I was reminded that my title is only my protection until it is not. Within minutes, it spread like wildfire, because the world was not just watching. The world was ready. It took 22 minutes. 22 minutes from the moment I clicked post on my statement to the moment my inbox exploded. Hundreds, then thousands of messages. Some from old friends. Some from foreign diplomats. Some from women who had never met me, but wrote as if we would known each other all our lives. By the time I opened my second email, #Alicia Monroe was trending worldwide. By the third, news anchors were saying my name, sometimes with reverence, sometimes with performative shock, but always with urgency. I watched my story ricochet through the media like a spark through dry timber. Ken, a diplomat removed from first class in alleged racial profiling incident. MSNBC ambassador speaks out. My title is my shield. Until it isn't he. Fox News predictably spun it differently. Airline under fire for mistaken identity. Passenger had no visible credentials. But truth did not need defending anymore. It was visible, palpable, and it was no longer mine alone. That morning, I was invited on Good Morning America. I declined. Then 60 minutes. Declined again, because this was not about sound bites. This was not about putting on a calm face for cameras so America could feel comfortable watching a black woman discuss trauma she did not cause. No. This was not about comfort. This was about clarity. Instead, I sat down with a young independent journalist. Black. Female. Smart as hell. Her name was Kira Lattimore. She reached out, not with a pitch, but with a simple message. You do not owe anyone your pain. But if you are ready to share your power, I want to help. I invited her to my home. No fancy lighting, no makeup team. Just two women. Two mics. Two truths. And the camera rolling. We talked for 2 hours. About the flight. About Victoria Langston. About growing up black in a world that pretends it does not notice you until you disrupt it. We talked about what it means to be seen only when you wear your worth in print and badges, in job titles, in expensive clothes that say, I am not a threat. And I said, through a voice as calm as steel, every time someone says, I did not realize you were important, what they mean is, I only respect who you are when you remind me of what you do. Kira blinked. Do you think the flight crew was racist? She asked. I paused. Not because I did not know, but because the answer was more layered than they would ever let me say on cable TV. I think they were trained to believe that certain people belong and others do not. I think they saw a black woman alone in first class and chose to act before they chose to ask. And I think the most dangerous kind of racism is the kind that hides behind procedure. The interview aired online that night. By dawn, it had 10 million views. By noon, 25. I received letters from airline employees, some apologizing, some confessing they would seen things like this and said nothing. One message read, "I have watched this happen. I have stayed silent because I did not want to be punished. But now, I think silence is the punishment." Even the airline could not ignore the storm. A public apology was issued, this time by the CEO himself. It was polished, carefully worded, vetted by legal teams. But this time, it was not just about me. It was about a broken system. We failed not just Ambassador Monroe. The statement read, but the values we claim to stand for. Victoria Langston was officially terminated, not suspended. Terminated. No reassignments, no quiet exits, no behind-the-curtain retirement. Her clipboard symbol of her reign was gone. But I did not celebrate her downfall. This was never about vengeance. I did not want her to suffer. I wanted her to see that the world she controlled with assumptions had shifted, that the woman she tried to remove was now the voice echoing through every terminal in the country. And yet, something inside me ached, because while I sat in press rooms and Zoom panels, I knew the pain was not isolated to me. It lived in millions. So, I turned this fire into something greater. I launched a coalition first seat and advocacy group for racial equity in travel and public services. We began tracking incidents, offering legal support, training allies, but most of all we told stories. Real ones, ones like mine, ones far worse, ones ignored until now. And slowly, the industry started to change. Mandatory bias training was not optional anymore. Airlines began reevaluating how security concerns were defined. Anonymous reporting tools were implemented by 3 major carriers. The ripple effect was real. All because someone filmed. All because the truth was louder than silence. All because I chose to speak not for revenge, but for redemption. And yet, even in all the noise, I found peace. Because truth, when released, has a sound that no campaign can mute. And once it starts, it does not stop. Victoria Langston sat behind her oak desk in her home office in suburban Virginia. The morning sun seeping through sheer curtains, pooling across the diplomas that once hung proudly behind her. But today, she was not proud. Today, she was trembling. Her phone had been buzzing for hours, then days, calls from unknown numbers, messages with words she would never thought would be aimed at her racist. Entitled, Power Drunk. Her social media, once filled with vacation photos and sunset quotes, was now a war zone. Friends she had not heard from in years were now silent. Her inbox, flooded with requests for comments, sat unopened, because no comment could rewrite what the world had now seen. Victoria Langston was no longer the composed head of cabin security operations for Skybridge Airlines. She was now a symbol of what happens when unchecked bias collides with public visibility. The final blow had come the day before, when the airline issued its formal statement, not just an apology, but a declaration. We recognize that racial profiling, even when subtle or unconscious, has no place in our company, as Langston's conduct on Flight 405 was inconsistent with our core values, and her employment has been terminated effective immediately. Terminated, not transferred. Not reassigned. Terminated. No golden handshake, no farewell party. Just a severed badge and a silence louder than the engines of any aircraft she once claimed to protect. And then the images surface, those stills from the in-flight video. One of her standing over me, clipboard clutched like a sword. Another of her face frozen in disbelief as the flight attendant whispered, "She is an undiplomat." The internet took those images and ran. Memes. Articles. Think pieces. Some called her Sky Karen. Others dubbed her the clipboard queen. But I did not laugh. I did not repost. I did not celebrate her humiliation. Because deep down, I knew people like Victoria are not born. They are conditioned. They are shaped by years of unchallenged authority, by systems that praise their vigilance, but never question its bias, by companies that hand them power without reflection, by a culture that tells them, "You are the standard," and everyone else must explain their presence. Still, accountability had to come, and it came. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail, not an email, a handwritten letter. The envelope was crisp, no return address. Inside, on plain white paper, was her handwriting neat, curved, controlled, as Munro. There is a part of me that still believes I was following protocol, that I was just trying to do my job. But there is another part of me that saw your eyes on that plane and now understands. I was not protecting anyone. I was protecting a lie I believed without questioning. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am just asking you to know I see it now. Victoria Langston. I read it twice. Then I folded it and set it down. I did not respond. Not because I hated her, but because some answers do not come in words. They come in what happens next. That week, I received an invitation to speak at a summit on global equity in transport and diplomacy. I almost declined. I was tired of being asked to relive the same pain for applause. But I went, not for them, for the ones watching. I walked into that room with my back straight and my head high. There were hundreds of people, executives, politicians, activists. They all turned and stood. Applause. But it was not me they were clapping for. It was the change I represented, the shift that began not when I posted a video, but when I refused to shrink. During my speech, I did not name Victoria. I did not have to. Instead, I said, let this moment be about more than punishment. Let it be about promise. Let it be about the world we build after the fall. The audience rose again. Outside, journalists waited with questions, but one girl stood apart. Black. Teenager. Braids pulled back. She held a notebook, clutched her chest like it was armor. As Munro, she said, voice soft, you think I can be where you are one day? I knelt to meet her eye. "You already are," I said, because I meant it. The fall of Victoria Langston was not the end of a villainous story. It was the beginning of someone else, as someone who had been told, by the way the world looks at them, that they should stay in economy, that they should stay silent, that they should apologize for existing, but no more. The clipboard had fallen, and no one rushed to pick it up, because the only authority that matters is the kind rooted in truth. 3 weeks had passed since Flight 405. And still, every morning felt different, not because the chaos that once was, but because of the clarity that followed. I stood at the window of my townhouse in Washington, D.C., a cup of herbal tea warming my palms. Down below, the cherry blossoms had begun to bloom along the sidewalk, pink petals fluttering in the breeze like tiny flags of rebirth. Peace, I realized, does not always come with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives in whispers. The whirlwind of interviews and invitations had slowed. The media, as they always do, moved on, but I had not. I could not, because the real work, the human work, had just begun. I had spent years in negotiation rooms, writing treaties, reviewing sanctions, whispering truths into ears, wearing $1,000 suits. But somehow, that seat on the plane seat 3 taught me more about human dignity than any summit ever had. And that morning, for the first time in a long time, I did not feel heavy. That same day, I walked into a classroom in Southeast D.C., not as a diplomat, but as a visitor. The school counselor had reached out to me personally. She said the kids had watched my interview with Kira Lattimore. They had questions, not political ones, human ones. I agreed without hesitation. The school was old but clean, decorated with artwork from students. Some of the drawings showed airplanes. Some showed women in suits standing tall. I smiled when I noticed one of them, a figure with dark skin and a navy blue blazer labeled Hero. In the classroom, a boy about 9 years old raised his hand. "Why did not you yell at the lady when she was mean to you on the plane?" I knelt beside him and answered honestly, "Because sometimes, when people expect us to get angry, staying calm is more powerful. And because my anger would not have made them see me, but my truth. That did." A girl with glasses whispered, "You were really brave." I shook my head gently. I was scared, but courage does not mean you do not feel fear. It means you do it anyway. When I left, they all stood and clapped, not because I was famous, but because they understood something most adults forget. Dignity is not about being perfect. It is about being unshakable in the face of erasure. Later that week, I returned to the United Nations building in New York. The guards at the entrance did not ask for my this time, not because they recognized my face, but because they had learned from what happened. I walked the marble floors with new purpose, not the kind that comes from duty, the kind that comes from ownership. This was my space, too. It always had been. At the Security Council meeting, I presented a new initiative, one I would spent sleepless nights drafting since the incident. It was not about airline policies or travel. It was about global equity in public infrastructure, about building systems that assume dignity instead of requiring it to be proven. My colleagues from around the world listened, and when I finished, the ambassador from Ghana stood and said, Let what happened to you become something that protects millions. I nodded, holding back tears. Later, in the quiet of my hotel suite, I sat on the balcony as the lights of Manhattan twinkled like stars brought to earth. I remembered my father's voice. Years ago, after I won my first speech competition. Daughter, your words are a gift. Don't use them to impress, use them to protect. And now, I finally understood what he meant. I was not fighting for a seat on a plane. I was fighting for the right to sit in peace, without being asked to prove I earned it. That week, the airline released a follow-up statement, announcing the establishment of a new passenger review protocol, co-developed with our First Seat Coalition. Victoria Langston's name was never mentioned again, not by them, not by me. Not because we forgot, but because we moved forward. And that is not the same as moving on. At home, I finally took off the blazer I had worn that day. I folded it gently, placed it in a box, and wrote on the lid, Flight 405 the day I took my power back. The box did not go in a closet. It went on a shelf, visible, next to my degrees and awards. Because that day was not a failure. It was a rise. And in that rise, I found something I did not know I had lost. The belief that my silence was safer than my voice. Now, I know better. Dignity does not whisper. It walks in the room with you. It sits when told to stand. It remains, even when pushed. And it never asks for permission to exist. The first time I saw her again was at a community forum in Baltimore, hosted by a coalition of educators, transit workers, and civil rights leaders. It was not televised. No cameras. No microphones. Just a folding chair circle in a church basement, and people who had stories to tell. I had agreed to attend quietly, no speech. No spotlight. I just wanted to listen. But something in that room felt heavier than policy. It felt personal. A woman across from me stood up. She was in her early 20s. White. Jeans faded. Voice shaking. I was on that plane. She began. The room shifted. My breath caught. Her hands trembled as she held onto her phone like it was a lifeline. I am the one who filmed it. And suddenly, time folded back in on itself. The moment. The silence. The screen. The weight of it all. I did not mean to record for clout, she said, eyes glossing with tears. I saw something wrong, and for the first time in my life, I could not do something. Her name was Emily Carter. 24. Nursing student. Lives with her grandmother. Never been political. Never been called brave. She said she grew up being told to be respectful, polite, quiet. But that day on Flight 405 something broke. I watched you stand there, she said to me. Voice trembling, and I knew if I did not do something, I would never be able to look at myself again. I walked across the room. Slowly. Purposefully. I did not shake her hand. I hugged her. Not because she saved me, but because she stood up when no one else did. And in that hug, I felt something shift not just between us, but inside everyone watching. Because courage is contagious. And sometimes it begins with the smallest act, clicking record when your conscience screams too loud to ignore. After the forum, we sat outside on the church steps. The evening air was thick with humidity and hope. I was scared. She confessed, voice soft. "What if I made it worse?" "You did not," I said. "You made it real." We talked for an hour about her studies, her fears, the friends she lost when she shared the video, the trolls, the threats, and then the thank you messages from people she did not know. Black parents, airline staff, young girls. One even wrote, "Because of you, my daughter saw that somebody stood up for us." That night, I realized my story had been the spark, but Emily's courage, that was the flame. The following week, I invited her to speak with me at a university town hall. She nearly declined, afraid of being accused of virtue signaling. But I told her, "You did not act for credit. You acted for truth. And that is worth sharing." On stage, I told the story. She told hers, and the room cried. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. We launched a program together that month, Witness Forward, an initiative teaching everyday people how to safely intervene, support, and document incidents of bias and injustice in public spaces. Not to create vigilantes, but to create witnesses who no longer look away. We trained teachers, bus drivers, clerks, teens, seniors, and it was not about race alone. It was about human dignity. We talked about immigrants, people with disabilities, the unhoused, the elderly, anyone who is told they do not belong until someone proves they do. The work spread, and so did the willingness. One day, a school principal from Alabama called us. A fifth grader had stood up to defend a new student being bullied for her hijab. When asked where she learned that courage, she said, "Miss Monroe and Miss Emily." I cried that night, not because I was sad, but because I had lived long enough to see the harvest of a moment born in humiliation. What began as silence in first class became action in classrooms, terminals, town halls, courtrooms, and living rooms. People were listening now. People were speaking. The domino effect was real, and it had a rhythm. See something. Feel something. Do something, and I realized we do not need every person to be loud. We just need them to be brave, one by one choice at a time, because justice does not always ride in sirens. Sometimes, it starts with one passenger standing up for another. Sometimes, it starts with you. They asked me to speak at the National Civil Rights Museum 100 years ago. This would have been a death sentence for someone like me, a black woman, standing behind a podium beneath a banner that read, "Dignity." Not permission. The air was electric. Not because of the media, not because of the applause, but because in every chair sat someone who had woken up. A teacher from Chicago who had written her entire classroom code of conduct. A flight attendant who filed a formal complaint against her own supervisor. A CO who vowed to audit internal protocols. starting with implicit bias. And somewhere in the crowd, sitting quietly in the third row, was Emily, wearing the same hoodie she would worn that day on Flight 405. No fanfare. No press. Just presence. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, and I knew the story was not mine anymore. It belonged to everyone. I stepped up to the podium, and I did not clear my throat. I did not glance at notes. I just spoke. I was never supposed to be a story. I was supposed to fly from Chicago to DCEF, take a meeting, write a policy, and go home. But sometimes, history does not ask your permission before it sits next to you. Sometimes, it taps you on the shoulder in 3A and says, "Your silence ends here." The room was still. I did not ask for justice. I expected it. I did not yell for attention. I deserved it. And I did not stand alone. I stood with every person who has ever been told to leave a room they had every right to enter. Then I paused, looked out at the crowd, and I said, "The question is no longer, why did this happen to me? The question is, when it happens in front of you, what will you do?" Some people lowered their eyes. Others nodded. But the weight of the moment settled evenly across every shoulder. Because I was not preaching. I was not performing. I was asking. And asking takes more courage than demanding ever will. I ended my speech with the same 3 words I wrote in my journal the day I returned to seat 3A. I choose presence. I choose presence even when it is uncomfortable. Even when they want me silent. Even when they pretend I am invisible. Even when the world says, "Don T cause trouble." Because being seen is not trouble. Being respected is not negotiable. Being here is not permission I will ever ask for again. After the speech, people lined up to speak to me. But I saw the woman in the back. Quiet. Elderly. Skin like soft paper. She did not approach. She just stood there with a cane in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. She nodded once and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded back, because some gratitude needs no microphone. That evening, I returned home. I placed the transcript of my speech in the same box with my blazer from Flight 405. The box was heavier now, not with shame. With testimony. Before bed, I walked onto my porch. The neighborhood kids were playing across the street. Their laughter was free, untethered, loud in the best way. A little girl with deep brown skin and pigtails yelled as, "Alicia, we saw you on TV." I smiled. Good things or bad things? Good things. She beamed. Real good. And as I stood there beneath the porch light, I remembered something my mother used to say. History does not always begin with heroes. Sometimes it begins with a no. Sometimes it begins with a seat you refuse to give up. And I knew, if there is one thing I want every person to carry after hearing my story, it is not outrage. It is not sympathy. It is courage. The kind that does not wait for permission. The kind that shows up, even if your voice shakes. The kind that records when someone's dignity is being erased. The kind that speaks when silence is violence. So I will leave you with this. You may never sit in seat 3A, but one day, you will see someone else in it. And when the moment comes, will you sit quietly, or will you stand with them? That is the real question, and I pray your answer is the one that makes history. After everything, after the judgment, the humiliation, the silence, the rise, the fall, one truth remains. Your dignity is not something you have to earn. It is something no one has the right to take, whether you wear a badge or carry none, whether your name is known or whispered, whether you sit in first class or stand in the back of the room, you matter, and no uniform, no clipboard, no system has the power to undo your worth. The story of Alicia Monroe is not just about a seat on a plane. It is about the power of identity, the importance of presence, and the unstoppable force of a person who refuses to disappear when erased. The lesson: in a world trained to doubt what it does not expect, being visible is an act of resistance. And speaking up for yourself, or for someone else, is an act of courage. The moment you decide to stand beside dignity, you shift the world closer to justice. So, to everyone watching, when you see injustice, do not scroll past it. When you witness silence, be the voice. When they question someone's place, help them stay seated. Because you may not change the whole system, but you might just change someone's life. If this story moved you, do not let it end here. Subscribe for more powerful true life stories that inspire change. Comment your thoughts below. How would you have reacted if you were on that flight? Share this video with someone who needs the reminder. You do not need permission to take up space. Because stories like this do not just deserve to be heard, they deserve to be remembered.